Our third speaker is Luis Olmedo, and he is the Executive Director for Comite Civico del Valle, whose motto is Inform People, Create Healthier Communities. And for several decades, Luis has worked to address the multiple environmental and public health issues in the border region. For example, Comite Civico helped to build a network of some 40 community-based air monitors in Imperial County. When he first joined our planning process, he sent me this list of his partners, and it was just an amazing list. Luis is going to tell us about his work, and I would like you to hear from him about how empowered communities are pioneering cutting-edge community citizen science through partnerships that connect the dots between public health, planning, and the environmental disciplines.
Thank you, Charles, for that intro. And what I'm going to share with you is not much different than what Arsenio shared with you or what Deanne has shared with you, perhaps pretty identical. The fact that a couple decades ago I was introduced to environmental justice, it really made a lot of sense as to the efforts that we've started with as an organization, working on civic engagement, working on a lot of the social justice issues that disenfranchise the community, particularly the farm worker population at that time in the early 2000s. Got to better understand that environmental justice had a history of a long, fought struggle that created mechanisms to help communicate with those from public health or government or others that can help bring resources and services and help contribute to improving the quality of life and solving some of these challenges that we face in environmental justice communities. This is a map of the Imperial Valley. I need to point right at it. There we go. So there's a lot of issues that affect the community in disproportionate ways. Some of them affect us all. In particular, like, for example, I'm going to go through a few slides that will highlight a few issues. Water is life, and water is also an economic engine for our valley. Without water, we would just be a desert. And although deserts are beautiful, it would not be able to foster and support the economic engine that it is. Agriculture is a huge economic engine, and coming from a farm worker family, we know how important that is to putting food on our tables. I've had the privilege and opportunity to work on the fields and got to experience the good and the very serious issues that affect the quality of life and the public health. Water, most recently, and as part of some of the policies that have been passed, it brings a lot of awareness, a lot of knowledge to our communities. For example, like the human right to water is a very important piece of legislation. Who knew that getting clean, affordable water to communities and to everybody was important? Water is life, and water is an extremely important element to maintaining our health. We're very fortunate to have support and partners, because without having partners, it's very difficult to really do much on our own. And we recently started a study to better understand what the conditions of water that are being supplied to homes were. And although there's a lot of data, a lot of times it's really hard to better understand how that data really translates into what the community is receiving. All we know is we want to turn on the faucet and we want to get clean water. That's what community wants. And why this is very important and why I think it's very important should be very important to public health is that as we were doing a study, there's been a lot of concerns from industry, because like I said, water is very important to to the production of food. The Imperial Valley is one of the most important areas of production, as well as the Central Valley. And it would be detrimental to our economy that we would somehow inadvertently affect our economy. But we cannot be afraid of being able to gather data. That is extremely important. And it's extremely important that people who do have the knowledge, whether it's the farmers who have been there for 100 years, whether it's our water and public utility, the scientists, the state agencies, everybody who has some knowledge to come together to be able to collect the data that we need so that we can better understand what are those solutions that we need for our communities. And Arsenio is right. A lot of times, and as well as Deanne, we are going to get attacked. But you know what? We're not the enemies. We are just trying to be part of that solution. And I think it's important to have these open dialogues and these healthy dialogues to be able to find and understand what is everybody's fear and how can we move past that fear. One of the things that I really find astonishing is that just a couple years ago, there was an enormous amount of participation and support from the federal government. And overnight, it's gone. Where is that support? And I think that's going to be very important to keep asking that question. Is that support there for public health? Is that support there for environmental justice? I have not seen it. It's gone. So what we have today is the state, and I'm glad that Arsenio here is from behalf of the Attorney General's office, who has been a champion for environmental justice. And as we move forward, nobody should be in fear of being able to go out there and be part of collecting data and be part of finding solutions so that we can improve public health for everybody, not just for a select few, not just for the person who has the dollars to be able to spend thousands of dollars so that they can get clean water, but for everybody, even for that person who can't afford it because they're making less than minimum wage. And there are people that make less than minimum wage. Another issue that we face in the Imperial Valley is the Salton Sea. This is an enormous problem that the state needs to be more involved with, and they have been more in the last few years. But this is something that affects the entire Southern California. And, I know that numbers that I've seen, up to 100 miles, there have been detection of sources of pollution coming from the Salton Sea. We're very close to Mexico as well. This is a big issue. And so some of the things that we're doing out there is, so the state and local authorities have come together to put together a Salton Sea mitigation plan. There are some short-term and long-term goals. Some of the short-term goals is dust suppression. We want to make sure that that dust does not go airborne and affect public health. Imperial Valley already suffers from PM 2.5, PM 10. We don't meet federal standards. There is still, however, a lot more support needed. The Imperial Valley, although we have very effective legislators, we don't have as many legislators as some of the more urban metropolitan areas do. We have one assembly member, one senator, we have one congressman on the southern end, one congressman on the northern end. And although they have been championing, they have been doing a phenomenal job in taking a leadership role and bringing more monies into the Salton Sea. There is more work ahead to be able to mitigate that. It is unfortunate that the Salton Sea is now just becoming a subject of greater awareness to our community. Okay, and the fact is we have over 85% population is Latino, monolingual. A lot of the population who are there have not had the privilege of, a lot of the population, not all, but a lot of the population had not had the privilege to be given the opportunity or afforded the opportunity to understand the ecological treasure that the Salton Sea once was and can still be. And that is important. And some of the things that we're working on is making sure that agencies like the natural resources agencies, they adopt policies of public health, they adopt policies of environmental justice, because they are tasked with bringing solutions to helping mitigate the sea, the conditions of the sea, as well as the habitat, as well as the wildlife. We've only seen it as an impaired sea. And only until recently, until there's been more education and more support. In fact, we are now participating in contributing to that effort to reach the hard-reached populations who have never, ever thought of the Salton Sea as a place to go have a picnic, as a place to go fishing, as a place to go boating. All right? Those aren't the type of amenities and type of privileges that we had historically in our community. Yet, if you look at the history, this was a hotspot for the Hollywood stars that would go and enjoy the sea at one point in time when it was considered to be a hotspot for recreation. And only today we're starting to see that there's more awareness and more knowledge, and we want to save the sea. Who would have thought that in our backyard we had such an ecological treasure? We have other issues as well as, like I said, air quality. There's a lot of sources of air quality. Although agricultural burning always is the thing that gets the most attention. When if you're up close and you see it, almost seems like a kind of mushroom type of effect that you would see in perhaps nuclear type of explosions. But it's actually not the largest source of emissions. Actually, particulate matter, dust coming from either from vehicle emissions, coming from tilling, coming from the desert. There's a lot of sources of emission that exist, and we have failed to meet federal clean air standards. And although Imperial has done an enormous effort of trying to change their policies, bringing in a diverse number of interventions, we are next to Mexico, who, if we are a couple 100,000 in population, Mexico is closer to 2 million. I mean, I don't know if anybody's done a more recent census, but it's a real huge contrast. A lot of times we get considered as though we're rural. We're not rural by no definition. We maybe look rural, but we have the metropolitan impact because a border fence, a political line, does not stop pollution coming from Mexico. And that brings me to international border. There's a lot of efforts happening today in the international border. Most recently, the California Air Resources Board, and we have a board member here, which I really thank for that, had given direction to the California Air Resources Board to not just adopt what they call state implementation plans. These plans get adopted whenever an area does not meet the federal standards for clean air. And so they have to put a plan of how we're going to achieve that, those measures of the Clean Air Act, how we're going to be in compliance. And this is the first time, actually, that the state says, we're going to approve your PM 2.5 plan. But, however, you have to create a plan as well as how there's going to be a collaboration binationally to be able to address some of these other emissions coming from Mexico that are the control of the local authorities in the county and the state. And so this has led into some additional efforts, such as an outreach campaign that in the holiday seasons, there's a lot of tradition. I know that because I was born in Mexico. So I know that there's a tradition of doing fireworks. In fact, when I was younger, we used to shoot those bottle rockets to each other's neighbors. That was like, who think of doing that nowadays? But we would do that all the time. And by the time it was midnight and everybody's celebrating and such a joyful time, I think it'd be like 10, 15 minutes after 12, and nobody could see it, and everybody would run inside, and everybody'd be choking, and the emissions were just so thick and so bad between the bonfires, between the fireworks. And so a lot of that has changed in education and PSAs and other things that are happening in Mexico, in Mexicali on our side. I'm not sure if it's happening in San Diego, Tijuana, but there's a lot of positive that's happening. We're starting to better understand the shifts in politics as well in Mexico. But more than anything, there's a work table that is happening right now where we're able to discuss of how we can better improve air quality on both sides of the border, because Mexico complains about ag burning drifting into their side, and we complain about vehicle emissions coming into our end. One of the things that are very significant is that Mexico now wants to do more community monitoring. It's an affordable way to get more data points and to be able to put more data in real time, and that's one of the projects that I think that the Air Resources Board will be supporting here very soon. I kind of spoke about this already. AB 617 is a significant piece of legislation A couple years ago, back in 2017, we had a couple of bills. One was a bill that Senator Coons, U.S. Senator Coons had presented, which was a citizen science and crowdsourcing bill. And another one was we wanted to make sure that we institutionalize community monitoring. We set ourselves out to launch a 40 monitor network in the Imperial Valley that measures PM10, PM2.5. How am I good in time? No? Am I? Okay. Oh, so I'll be wrapping it up here. Once I get started talking. So as part of an NIH grant, there was a $2 million grant awarded to the Public Health Institute, a program that we work with, California Tracking. And this allowed us to, in partnership with the University of Washington, we were able to set out 40 air monitors. And one of the things that was really important, this is really a key word, is that we would always get pushback. Whether it was crowdsourcing, whether it was citizen science, there was always pushback. They didn't want to do any of this. And it says, you have to institutionalize it. You have to institutionalize it. What does all that mean? And well, now I understand what institutionalizing means. It means that you legislate it, and the legislature forces state agencies to just do it and gives them direction to do it. So if that's the way to institutionalize it, this is a very successful effort at 617. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about that. So I'll just kind of go through this. This is by natural. Coronavirus screen's been widely discussed, and I'll leave it there. These are all communities that have been funded so far, $50 million in grants that are out there. $10 million have been given out as of now. And it's going to help these areas that are shaded here from Imperial, San Diego, Los Angeles, the Inland Empire, the Central Valley, the Bay Area. This is a very significant amount of investment. There hasn't been this much of investment in environmental justice from government since I can remember, the last couple of decades. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.